Interface Video presents Fairfield Today. Brought to you by Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan, Fairfield Medical Center, Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, the Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and the Frankie Smith Funeral Home.
Hello friends, and welcome to Fairfield Today. I'm Paul Jassogne, your host. Thank you for joining us on the show today as we broadcast and telecast from the beautiful and spacious lobby here at Fairfield Federal. It's a little overcast and cloudy as we look outside today, but with the winter we've had, we can't complain a little bit about this. We'll take this and then get real nice and have spring. If that's our way it goes, that's fine with most of us. 1st January, I can remember in a long time, I didn't have to shovel snow, so I'm okay with all of that. I think one of the agencies in town that's probably underreported on and not a lot known about it, and what some of is known about it perhaps is incorrect, and I think we'd like to dispel some rumors and straighten up some things, is the Lighthouse in town. And if that rings a bell, then you know something about it, and if you don't, then hopefully we'll inform you about some things the Lighthouse does. We've got the director of the Lighthouse today, Susan Nixon-Stoughton. Susan, lovely to have you back with us.
Thank you for having me.
Fun to talk about the Lighthouse. Again, I think there's a lot of pieces of misinformation on what you are and what you aren't. Mm-hmm. I think we'll try to clear that up today, but as you look back at 2019, I don't know if you have any numbers in yet, as you look at the year, what kind of year was it for the Lighthouse?
Well, you know, I always tell people that no 2 days at the Lighthouse are ever the same. There are days clearly that I feel like I'm working outside of my pay grade, but if it weren't for the staff that we had, we couldn't do what we do. Every client's needs are separate and individual, and we're not doing our job if we're not addressing the here and now, but more importantly to show them that these moments in time don't have to define the rest of their life. Sure. And it's very, very rewarding when a client does secure permanent housing. They have moved on. They're extremely proud of themselves, and we feel like we're losing a family member, yet we're extremely proud of them because they had to put the work in. We can guide them, but we can't do it for them. So to answer your question about some numbers, just in the first 6 months of this fiscal year, which started in July 1, we've had 1,802 nights of shelter to 71 individuals, and those numbers are down a bit over this time last year. But again, it ebbs and flows. Right now, today, we're packed. So you never know. We have processed 173 crisis calls, and that ties in a little bit to what we are not. We receive an awful lot of questions from people thinking that we're a homeless shelter, and we are not.
That's probably the number one thing that the people that don't know, they don't mean it in certainly a derogatory way, but they think, well, what do people come there just to get away? And you get a big definition for what you do.
Sure. Any client that is brought in has to go through a crisis call, and an awful lot of questions are asked of them that are required before we're able to bring them in. And domestic violence certainly is what will bring a client in. Sadly, homelessness, as much as we would love to help, that's not what we're funded to do. Sure. So we do make referrals to make sure that we do everything we can to find them a place to...
Well, and there are places they can go, it's just not for you.
Exactly, sure. Exactly.
And then you help them get there.
Exactly. The other big part of what we do is, so far in the first 6 months, we have secured 607 protection orders just in the first 6 months. And so basically, when you think about that, those aren't people who are seeking shelter. So the best way to define that would be, I am blessed. My parents are local. I have siblings that live in Fairfield County.
Great support system.
If something were to happen to me, I always use the example, if Tom were to fall and bump his head really, really hard and think the right thing to do would be to, obviously make me a victim of domestic violence, I would reach out to my court advocate. I would secure a protection order that tells him he has to stay away from me, but I would have someplace else to go and I wouldn't have to necessarily call the
Sure,
shelter.
sure.
So when you think about those numbers, just in those first 6 months of this year, we've secured 607 protection orders. So when you talk about we're underreported and people don't necessarily hear a lot about us, a lot of that ties to we're not the type of conversation a lot of people are comfortable hearing.
Sure.
So it is necessary. There is a lot of domestic violence happening in Fairfield County, and certainly a lot of what we do is out seeking support so that we can continue to keep the doors open to help the next person that needs us.
Let's talk about, you talked about the people you have. Tell me about your staff. Tell me about the people that do the day-to-day really tough work.
Incredible people, and many of them have been there 4 or 5 years or more. I have a caseworker, and Jess is phenomenal. She works with every other agency in Fairfield County to make sure that when a client comes in, if they need to secure employment, we're making the proper referrals to Job and Family Services. If they need to apply for some financial assistance, making sure they're getting to the right department at Job and Family. We work a lot through Fairfield County 211 to make sure that we're getting them into the places that they need to have for the help. If a client needs taken to a doctor's appointment and they don't have a vehicle, we make sure, make sure that they get there. We also have childcare. So when moms need to go to those appointments, whether it's Job and Family Services or perhaps it could be that they're interviewing for a job for 2 hours a day, they can actually leave their child in our care, and Deb's the one providing that child care.
Important.
I have house managers. The Lighthouse is open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So I have to have somebody there all day, all night. Holidays, weekends, it doesn't matter. I have some of the best house managers that you could ever imagine. They don't get rattled. And to be in that job from the crisis call to, let's face it, we're bringing men and women in who have had a lot of trauma in their life, and we're saying, well, now you're going to live in this group setting. Crap happens. Mm-hmm. What I can't have is a house manager that loses their cool.
Sure.
And they do a phenomenal job keeping up with that. We just talked about those 607 protection orders. It's hard to believe in Fairfield County I have 4 full-time court advocates. They meet with clients, they set up appointments to get in front of a judge, they secure those temporary orders that then turn into a protection order that could be 3 to 5 years. And all 4 of them stay busy all day, 5 days a week. It's unimaginable to me. There are other counties that are similar in size and don't have that many. We are very, very blessed, and they're needed.
Does a typical person that enters into your care, into your domain, does that typically start out with a crisis call? Is that generally how it all begins?
So yes and no. If they're looking for shelter, 100% of the time, yes.
Okay.
If they are looking for a protection order, that is a phone call that they can make to the shelter, and we can make sure that they get in touch with one of the court advocates.
Well, we've talked about a lot of tough situations here day to day. I mean, I'm sure your advocates down there can have stories. They could all write books, and as could you.
Anybody in the shelter.
Things in
Yes.
that world,
Mm-hmm.
in that world.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something kind of neat coming up here.
Mm-hmm.
Is your annual spring style show and luncheon, and we've got a nice poster we'll show on that. It's coming up here in about a month, March 7th.
Yes.
Out at Crossroads Event Center out on West Fair Avenue, past the campgrounds out there, or near the campgrounds out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like it's going to be a great event. I'm sure you're looking forward to this.
Last year was my first year to attend, and it was a pretty incredible event. We'll have around 200 folks that come out, and they want to be a part of,
Nice.
a nice
Nice.
afternoon out. And let's face it, in February, people are looking for something to do. They've gotten through the holidays. They're looking forward to spring, and it's just a great day for everybody to come together, kind of see what the spring fashions are going to be, have a wonderful lunch, but it's just more about the community. This year,
Tying into
yes.
everything. Yeah.
This year we have a survivor who is going to model, and she's going to share a few words about her story and how she ended up at the Lighthouse. an incredible woman with a couple of incredible, a child that's hers and a child that she's raising, phenomenal person, and people will get to hear her story. This year we're doing something a little different for tickets. We're asking people to go to Eventbrite. So if they just type
That's
in
a website?
lhstyleshow.eventbrite.com, they will be able to purchase their tickets and take care of everything, even if they want to have a certain table that they want to sit at with certain people, because many women have been coming to this for years and years. So they have their group that they want to come back. They're able to accomplish all of that by simply signing on to Eventbrite. However, if anybody does have questions, they can reach out to Anna Ditto, who is the board vice president, and the Style Show is her baby, at 740-215-6253.
And I'm sure this information's on your website.
It is being added as we speak.
Okay.
LH Style Show, yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Lighthouse Style Show.
Yeah, but
eventbrite.com.
Yes, but just the LH.
Sure.
LH Style Show, yes, that's it. .eventbrite.com.
It's nice probably for some of the people to have kind of an uplifting moment like that for many of them, a difficult time.
It is. Last year they asked me to speak, and it was probably too soon. I hadn't been employed by the Lighthouse long enough, and it became very emotional to me because I didn't expect, nobody can expect to see what we see as the result of domestic violence.
Sure.
But we, at that point in time, had just transferred a client who was a victim of human trafficking to a treatment center, and really reliving her story and sharing her thank you letter. It was very, very emotional for me because I hadn't wrapped my head around domestic violence and trafficking running hand in hand, because it's all rooted in control. And the weekend of our Style Show last year was the same weekend as the Arnold Classic, Fitness Classic, and it's one of the largest human trafficking events in Columbus. So
I was reading about that in the paper. I had no idea.
So it's all tied together, so it became quite emotional for me. So this year, should I speak, I think I'm going to be able to handle it a little better, but we're a tough topic to talk about, and I would be lying to tell you that our staff, you can't help but become personally involved in our clients and their stories.
Sure.
And sometimes there will be a few tears. You can't help, if you're human and have a heart, it's just where you go sometimes.
Pulls at your strings. And we've only got about a minute. By one touch, you've got a big golf outing coming up later, May.
We do in May. As soon as we get done with the Style Show, we'll start advertising the golf outing.
And that's in May at
It'll be out at
Valley
Valley
View?
View. Yes, it will. We're changing it from a Saturday event this year to a Friday for many of those who said that, they want to be able to pull corporate teams together, and that's a better day.
Sure.
So we know right now it's going to be Friday, May 15th, and it'll be a morning tea time, and just kind of looking forward to seeing what we do this year.
Our guest has been Director Susan Nixon-Stoughton from the Lighthouse, and I hope we've dispelled some rumors on what they don't do, on what you do, and what you do is very well done. I will say that. A great organization, and a tough place day to day. You can't get into a lot of things going on, but we can kind of tough the highlights. Look them up you can find them, Google them, go on your search engine, find them. Find out about the Style Show coming up here in about a month. Sounds like a great time, Susan. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much. We'll be back on Fairfield Today in just a moment.
Did you know that 2/3 of teens and young adults who report abuse of prescription medicines are getting it from people they know, including friends and family? We need to remember to secure them in a safe place, even lock them up if necessary. Monitor your medications so you know exactly how many pills are in each bottle. And finally, keep track of your refills. If you are done with their use, properly dispose them to avoid abuse. You can do this in a number of ways. 1. Take them to a local drop box at the Lancaster or Pickerington Police Departments or at one of our drug take-back events. 2. Take the drugs out of their containers, mix them with cat litter or used coffee grounds in a container, seal and place them in the trash. Remember to remove all personal information from your pill bottles. Or 3. Check the prescription information regarding the specifics if the medication could be flushed, or call your pharmacist. Remember, if you are done with its use, properly dispose to avoid abuse.
This message is brought to you by the Fairfield County Adam H. Board.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to Fairfield Today. Pleasure to have you with us as now we're into what almost feels like springtime as we tape the show today. As again, it's been an amazing winter so long, and I made that reference earlier. 1st January, I could remember in a long time where I haven't shoveled snow sometime in January. And I think somebody that will be thankful for that in many different areas is the mayor of Lancaster, David Scheffler. And Mayor, first of all, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here, Paul.
Always a pleasure to have you on.
Good to see you.
And I would say, without having talked about this at all earlier, I'd have to say that from a city standpoint and all the things economically that go into that, it's probably been a good thing not to have snow.
Yes, it weighs toward a good thing, but there's a bad part of it too, which we need to talk about.
We will talk about that.
Right.
That is something we'll talk about later in the show.
So not having snow certainly is a benefit to the streets.
Sure.
Because that means we probably will end up with a lot fewer potholes. And wear and tear on the trucks when they're out plowing snow is terrible, and so we've saved that wear and tear. A lot of overtime that the city has to pay has been saved, and also comp time off that the crews get.
To make up for that?
Yes, so they can elect to take comp time instead of getting paid overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And typically they do that in nicer weather when they otherwise would be out repairing streets, repaving streets, etc. So not having the overtime to pay means that we have more money left in the summer to use to repair streets, resurface streets. So hopefully we can get a few more streets done than we thought we might have earlier. The downside of that is that in order to get salt and to get a reasonable price for salt, we have to contract for thousands of tons of salt. Mm-hmm. So we have not used much salt at all this year, and we still have to take delivery of 1,500 tons of salt. So our salt barn is full, which means then that we have to rent space from one of the townships to store salt until next year. So it's not all.
There's a yin and a yang to everything.
There's a yin and a yang.
Yes.
I think when I became mayor 2 years ago, we had salt stored in Bern Township. Unfortunately, that next winter was pretty bad, and we used up all the stored salt and all the salt that we typically buy, and I think I even had to buy extra salt that winter. So, when the groundhog predicted an early spring, we didn't know it was going to be the next day. And here we are, running around yesterday.
Buckeye Chuck was right.
In shirt sleeves, and even today it's nice and warm
Amazing.
out. I think that's going to change in the next couple of days.
Well, there are things we want to talk about the warmness and how that affects us, and lots of things going on with the city we want to talk about. But I think the first thing, and I want to make sure we had a little time to spend with this, is in March we've got the tax levy coming up.
Yes.
March 17th, I think it
March
was.
17th.
March
right.
17th. And something that ran earlier with the city will be back on in an attempt to get it passed this time. And I think just hearing you talk to your cohorts, to your friends, to different organizations you talk to, this is a pretty meaningful tax levy that's coming up.
It is. We barely have, actually we're operating on less revenue than we got in 2007. The city has grown, everything has gotten more complex, regulations, state and federal, have gotten tougher and more time consuming to comply with. I've said when I became mayor, I quickly learned three things. City government is much more complicated, and government in general is much more complicated than I ever realized, and I thought I was pretty well informed. Number two, it takes forever to get something done in the government. Just the simplest things that you want to do, and you find out you can't do them because you have to do this first, you have to do that, you have to get a resolution from council, and it has to go 3 readings, and it takes 2 months to do something in business you could have got done in 2 hours.
That seems to make absolute common sense.
Yeah, absolute common sense. And of course, it's to protect the public and funding and all that. So there's reasons behind it. Sometimes maybe they go overboard a little bit. And of course, the third thing I learned quickly was we have no money, because, you know, a new mayor comes in with ideas. We should do this, we can do that, we'd like to do this. We have no money for anything. So, you know, we have cut and cut and cut. You know, the former administrations, in 2007, we had 477 full-time equivalent employees, and now we have 440. This year, we were forced to make some reductions in force in police and fire. That is the largest part of the budget. It's just, you can't pay people with air, you know, you've got to have cash to do that. So
I haven't talked to Adam Pillar, police chief, about this. I have talked a lot to Chief David Ward with the fire department, and I think, as you indicated, this safety service end of this equation, with more money needed, which equates to more people and better services, it's pretty much they really need this.
They really do. I mean, we have been suffering recently from, defection isn't the right word, but a loss of police and fire to other cities that pay $20,000 more than we pay. We lost a veteran fireman to the city of Heath for, I understand, $20,000 more in pay, and we just lost a veteran police officer to Groveport, of all places, which has 3,000 or 4,000 people, and for $20,000 more a year. And so, coupled with that, because our pay is so low, we have trouble getting applicants for jobs, where 10 years ago we might have had 75 or 100 applicants for openings. Today we have a handful, 10 maybe. And certainly they have to pass a civil service test and go through all kinds of qualifications, polygraph, physical, drug test, psychological test. And if you have 10 applicants, you might end up with 2 that actually get through all the evaluations in order to qualify to be a policeman or a fireman. So it gets tougher and tougher to keep police and to keep fire. We really need a boost in revenue so we can address some of these issues.
I can remember, I don't know what it's been, maybe 15 years ago, the schools were going through the same thing. We couldn't pass a school levy, a bond. We couldn't pass anything. And we lost a lot of good kids, a lot of teachers, because they were worried about their jobs might not being there in the fall, having the cutbacks. They're just, they talk about them, they could. And now the city's kind of in that position. And it wasn't until we passed some levies and some issues with the schools, and now we're in great shape, but it's going to take that apparently to get the city back.
Yes. And the biggest thing that's happened is there's a concept called the local government funds, which comes through the state budget, which the state agreed to share sales tax revenue with cities, counties, and other municipalities when the sales tax was passed, 70 years ago. And they kept that promise until 2008 and 9, when Governor Casey came into office and there was a huge deficit in the state budget. They slashed the local government fund, cost Lancaster $2 million a year. So we've been living for the last, 10, 11 years with $2 million less than we would have received if they hadn't cut it. And we've had no way to make that up. We don't get sales tax. We get very little real estate tax. We get a little piece of real estate tax, but not anything significant compared to our general fund budget. So it's been, I really commend prior city administrations for living within their means. They have, our engineering department, our building department have all been cut, and we've got projects that we need to do in engineering. We just don't have the staff to do them, and it's really critical, and we need some help from the citizens.
And so I'd say that if anybody has any questions about this, or an individual or group wants to know more, call your office. I know Paul Martin, any of you would be glad to come out and talk about this.
Yes, I'm happy to come out and speak to groups or even individuals about the situation, what it really looks like, how we got where we are, what we need, etc.
A few months ago, I had, I can't think of his name right now, is a gentleman that heads up the census.
Oh, yes.
And he was on, individual, did a great job. I'd heard him speak, and I asked him to come on. He was nice enough to come on, and it's his time right now. His census coming up. And I gather, just in looking at what's going on, this has some effect on the city.
Oh, it absolutely has an impact on the city, because I think there are, as I recall, $600 billion worth of federal funds that are basically allocated based on census. And so the more people you have, the more money you get. So it's critical that we count every single person so we can get our fair share of the money that's going to be divvied up in the next 10 years. Also, Ohio is impacted based on the number of congressmen we have, and also the state legislature is apportioned based on population in some way, so we could be affected in our representation in Columbus. But Ohio stands to lose possibly one congressional seat. We need to get everybody counted. And I think his name is Andrew, as I recall. I've spent some time with him too.
Nice guy.
Yeah, very nice guy from Newark.
Got a big job.
He has a huge job. The hardest population to count is kids, like between 2 and 10 years old or something. And their families, I don't know, maybe don't want to give up the information, but it's confidential. The information isn't going to be shared with anybody. It's easy to do. You can do the census online this year for the first time, so I think you'll get a card in the mail or something, and you can go online and enter your information. It's easy to do. It's confidential, no downside. Nobody's going to know what you say. So
do that. Get it done.
Get it done. March 31st.
Yep. You talked a little bit about it earlier. We've got a couple minutes left. Street paving in Lancaster. Mm-hmm. That's something that's not quite as awful to talk about now as it was.
Well, the citizens passed a 3 mil levy about 5 or 6 years ago, which generates $2.1 million a year. We have a whole process as to how the streets get chosen. The mayor and city council don't have any input into that. It's done on hopefully a scientific process. But last year, the state legislature passed an increase in the gas tax, which will get us about $850,000 a year. So we even last fall, we were able to do a few more streets than we anticipated. So this summer, again, we'll be able to do more streets than we have in the past. Gas tax has been going down because of increases in mileage, electric vehicles, etc. So, the street department, like everybody else, has been living on less and less over the years as the need goes up. And so there is a process that has to do with the condition rating, pavement condition rating, average daily traffic count, when we're going to dig it up, because there are streets in town that we know we're going to dig up in a year or two for sewers or gas lines or something, so obviously we're not going to pave them, come back and dig them up. What streets we might have federal or state money for coming up. Fair Avenue is a good example. Pierce Avenue we did a couple years ago, it got in pretty bad shape, but we knew we were going to get $1 million to redo that. So there's a whole process that we go through every year to look at the streets, what gets paved, and I know there are streets that aren't in good shape, but we have a process to do that. If a street has a poor condition rating, but it has 5,000 cars, it is going to get paved a lot quicker than a poor condition rated street that has 500 cars. Mm-hmm. So that's just the way it has to work. We can't pave all the streets in 1 year.
Well, our guest has been Lancaster Mayor David Scheffler. Thank you for joining us today. And I guess the key thing to take away from this is March 17th is a critical juncture for the city. It's an important time. Get out there and help the city.
Go vote.
Go vote.
Invest in Lancaster.
Invest in Lancaster. Mayor Dave Scheffler with us today. That's our show on Fairfield Today.
Interface Video presents Fairfield Today. Brought to you by Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan, Fairfield Medical Center, Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, the Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and the Frankie Smith Funeral Home.